Finally. Okay, sorry for the delays. So how do you have success in retail? Well, you have success in retail just like you have success in any other business. You buy low and you sell high. And if I'm in a retail environment, it means that I have two sides of the ledger that I must look at. I must look at my ability to most efficiently manage my costs, and I have to find some way to generate the greatest amount of money, which is demand. And so on Tuesday, we talked about the cost side strategies, ways in which we can go about and maximize the profits in the way that we control our costs. And so GMROI, as we talked about, is getting the best return on our investment in inventory. Gross margin and spit out there, full-time equivalent employee is getting the optimum amount out of each employee by adding more employees if I can sell and keep my cost constant. And then finally, gross margin per square foot means I'm going to maximize every single square inch of the particular territory that I'm working with. And that generally means squeezing the cost down to the vendors. And we'll talk about the reasons why that's come about. So, went through all of those. We talked about the cost side strategies. Now we're going to talk about demand side strategies. These are the strategies ultimately that we want to use to be able to increase demand, which ultimately means that it increases our sales. You've already seen these. Many of these are already service outputs. So these are things that we are familiar with. There is probably no more important function in terms of a demand side strategy than breaking bulk. This is the provenance of a retail intermediary. This is the reason that retail intermediaries exist. The most traditional model of any store through history is the gathering of goods in bulk, segmenting those goods into sizes that the consumers desire, and giving the consumer exactly the quantities they want. And if I can't give the consumer the quantities that they exactly want, then I'll give them a discount. And how do we figure that? The smaller the unit I make, the more I can ask. So Dr. Albinson and I, when we go down to Myrtle Beach, well, we go to Surfside. But anyway, when we go down there, one of the things that we're carrying is a very small bottle of Prel. And that small bottle of Prel, if I bought it in the convenience store, would cost the exact same amount of a 24-ounce bottle of Prel. And the reason why is it's delivered in the size that I need it. They've played with this model for years in terms of how much is enough on the shelves for consumers to have everything that they want. This also comes into play when we talk about delivery and waiting times. But the dollar store has taken the entire idea to the extreme, because what they have done is, in extent of expanding the goods that they have in their stores, they sell the same number of goods and they expand the number of stores. They actually were building $1,000 stores from 2008 until 2023, and I think now they're having to catch their breath, because I think they have something like 22,000 stores in the United States, probably more than that. I'm maybe missing some, but they're still growing. But one of the things that they do as efficiently as possible is they break bulk. Spatial convenience, and this is another one that Dollar General has grabbed onto and has probably made it their thing. So spatial convenience is goods sold that require very little effort. So once again, we're talking a particular product category as well. What this means is stores should be convenient to their target market. Convenience means location. I want you to think of the Dollar Generals. Is it unusual, or let me just say it's not, but think about where they are. They are in locations going outward of the center of Boone. So if you think about the one 421 going towards Tennessee, the other one going to Wilkesboro, they're on the right-hand sides so that people going outward can make an easier turn. They do those things for reasons. Being on the appropriate side of the street can be the difference between success and failure. Not only that, but there's a particular rule that says that it is agreeable for consumers to have goods of the same category type located close enough to each other, which is why you see Walgreens and CVS's always clustered near each other. There's another reason why, automobile dealerships are near each other, because that is a shopping good and it requires that there be shopping done. And so spatial convenience means convenience, but it's also about a particular type of category of the goods that you're selling. Putting all of those things together, waiting and delivery time has gone through such a change in the last decade. I don't get. It is amazing now, 20 years ago, it would be impossible to get goods next day without paying an arm and a leg. And yet I can order on Amazon. And if I order at the right time, I can actually have it there the next day, all part of that fee. And yet, because of COVID, we've had to readjust what we consider about waiting and delivery time. And so where Pizza Hut delivery made its life on 30 minutes or less, 45 minutes is about reasonable. Who now goes and gets their own pizza and orders online? Am I the only one? Yeah. Buy online, pick up in store. Here we go. Because I can go down the road in 15 minutes and pick it up instead of waiting 45 and getting another 20% tip. Okay. Same thing. It's how much the consumer tolerates. All right. And there's a very narrow bend to that. So product variety. I've got a slide here I want to show you because it'll make it a little bit easier for you to understand this. He said, hopefully. So it is actually that slide. Oh, give me a break. No, I don't want that. Okay, never mind. We'll go back to this one. Let me just make sure we're recording it. Excuse me again. Okay, sorry about that. So, width and depth. This tends to be a very confusing subject when we're talking about the product mix, okay? So the width has to do with the total number of unique items, and the total or the depth is the number of permutations of that particular item. So this is Procter & Gamble. This is their toothpaste, bar soaps, shampoos. Now, I'm not surprised about shampoos that you would have that much depth because it's a very personal item. The shampoos that we use, we all have one that we consider to be unique and special. But look at laundry detergents. Laundry detergents, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 different laundry detergents. At one time they had 12. How many different ways can you do laundry? And yet, consumers had their own unique variety, or the ones that they wanted. Interesting thing about Gain. See, Gain came in 1966. Gain was kind of a deal breaker as well, or I wouldn't say deal breaker, but it kind of broke the mold. So in the 60s, when they had laundry detergent was a size, always was. The implications in marketing is that if I were going to use liquid detergent, that was always for dishwashing. I wouldn't use that for washing clothes. Well, in the late 60s, they started realizing that they were putting something in the laundry detergent that was bad, okay? So, how does dirt break off of clothes? The way it works is that soap is what's called an emulsifier. It kind of takes apart the little molecules that are dirt, but it needs a chemical reaction to make that happen as well. And so what is one of the things to create a chemical reaction in your 6th grade biology is heat, okay? So they would put phosphates inside of laundry detergents. Phosphates is phosphorus, okay? It also carries a radioactive content built in because it comes very low under the ground. And then suddenly somebody thought it's not a good idea to be dumping radioactive waste inside, and so they had to change laundry detergents. So I know I'm going on. Anyway, due to the 70s, and Procter & Gamble started doing these different compositions that were liquid instead of solid, but they had to get past this barrier, this mental thing that said that laundry detergent can only be solid. So what they did was they sent out 60 million 2-load sample bottles free to every registered newspaper owner in the United States. 60 million. All right. Who's not going to use it? And overnight, we went to liquid detergents, and the rest is history. All right. So now you know a little history. I hope it brightened your day. Anyway, so width and depth. All right. The determination of that width and depth has a lot to do with, are we a niche? Are we a large group that satisfies as many consumer things as possible? It all comes down to the resources that we have and the intelligence to use it. Okay. So product variety. So customer service has to do with more than just simply helping customers, although that is a big part of it. Retailing is still one of the number one most labor intensive industries in the world. It is not surprising that Walmart has 2.6 million employees. There's a line item that's called sales, general, and administrative expenses. And these are the costs that it has to do with keeping the consumer shopping. Now, for specialty stores, they have even higher prices. And so how they spend their money is a very important thing in being able to keep their retail outlets alive. And so specialty shops came up with a brilliant idea that malls and department stores never thought of. And it's been around forever. The shopping cart. When you go into a TJ Maxx or you go into a Big Lots, one of the things that you will see there that you won't see in a mall or a specialty place is a shopping cart. And why should you have shopping carts? Because the average consumer will put one more item in a shopping cart than they will just simply carrying it in their arms. Just one more item. The average is like 7.2 things in a shopping cart versus 6.1 things in your hands. Yeah, it's a funny statistic, but just think, if your consumers just carried out one more thing, just one more thing, just think that what that would do to your bottom line. And so it's how we spend our money at customer service that's extremely important. Now, the other big thing about that also is that it's not necessarily bad for consumers to have to do some of the work themselves, because consumers generate a little bit of personal satisfaction. In the 70s, one of the things that the great oil embargo did was it made gas stations find ways of lowering gas prices. When I grew up, you never got out of your car. Someone came and pumped the gas for you. They also cleaned your windshields. And they did it at 19 cents a gallon. Okay, that's the lowest price I can ever remember. However, when time moved on in the 70s, when the oil embargo came and people were desperate because, my God, they were spending 49 cents a gallon of gas, they were looking for any ways to cut bargains. And one of them was to start pumping their own gas. And now it's common. And here's the same thing: is consumers derive greater happiness from their own choices. And believe it or not, I'm one of those people who likes to check out their own stuff because I want to get out. All right. So anyway, knowing the right way to spend ultimately determines the satisfaction our consumers get. And so those are the demand strategies. So what we're going to talk about in this next part is some of the other strategies that are out there for retail that use different conduits. But when we talk about emergent strategies in chapter 9, that's when we'll talk about the omnichannel. Okay, so this will be a discussion on some of these strategies that we know of already. And in terms of general categories, we also need to consider stores that are known as category killers. And so category killers are those particular stores that have specialties, but in a massive scale. Academy Sports, Best Buy. A Best Buy will break bulk for you, but they also have an incredibly robust assortment of things. They're starting to sell washers and dryers. But along with category killers and specialty stores, you have narrow stores like Footsloggers. They're not an academy. They specialize in a niche. And so you can have a specialty store that's a category killer and a specialty store that's a niche store like Footsloggers, and they both compete in the same area. And Footsloggers competes against Academy by having the advantage of spatial convenience. They are here, all right? And so generally that's how niche stores compete. They combine their specialty along with convenience, or spatial convenience, and that's how they survive. Whereas large stores like Academy, people flock to them. So, nothing here we haven't seen before. Amazon was the first real store to take advantage of the idea of having a width 1,000 miles long and 1 inch deep. So in other words, you can find anything on Amazon, but they might have 1 or 2 of each one. Internet, of course, completely internet, there is no location except other than the internet. They have captured somewhere around 14% of the total retail trade now, and 11 to 14%, depending on what you're talking about. And that is certainly a new channel, and one that is going to be around as long as time comes. Now, the direct selling channel, this is the one that we would talk about if we were talking about makeup, talking about Pampered Chef, those kind of things. Let me just talk of the example of Avon. So Avon does not have stores. They basically have selling units, okay? They have individuals who do the selling for them, and they sell directly to them. Well, Avon had this difficulty because they started realizing they could sell goods online and then bypass all of the individuals who basically built the store itself. Well, of course, there was a revolt. There should have been. And so Avon had to come to a settlement with their agents. And what they do now is that anything that is sold online, it is delivered to whoever those agents, that territory is. So that was a way of making it work. Direct selling channel is exactly what it sounds like. It is face-to-face personal selling with an individual. The one difficult thing about this channel, and we'll talk about it, is the probability of what's known as a pyramid scheme. So how does this work? So Avon, two things that an agent does is they try to sell to individuals, but they also try to have agents under them because they make a percentage of whatever their agents make. And so actually what can happen is an agent can make more money off of selling agencies than they can actually selling the product itself. Well, this is what's called a pyramid scheme. You get more and more people as sellers, And eventually what happens theoretically is you run out of people in the United States to sell to. And so that's the danger of a pyramid scheme. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about who's the biggest dog on the porch now when it comes to channels in retail. So before the 70s, all power resided with the manufacturers. And then from the 80s to the 90s, there was a slow change until in 1996, Pearson wrote in the Harvard Business Review that power has forever changed to the retailers, and it was that company with the W in the front, run by Sam Walton. And that corporation has forever changed the way things are. Power now resides with the retailers, and ironically, with fewer retailers or with the great washout from 2018 to 2020 of retailers, power has even grown more for the retailers. And so why? And so these are like 5 reasons why retailers now dominate. So there are about 100,000 supermarkets in the United States. Calculate the number also of Dollar Generals. 4,600 Walmarts in the United States in various forms. Dollar Tree, Family Dollars, just enormous numbers of stores. So the first part of this is competition is based upon the prices of the things that they sell, especially when those goods can be bought in so many different places. And so what has happened is there are people inside of organizations like Dollar General that are called profit centers. And so the purchasing of items inside of these retailers have become locations where corporations like Dollar General can actually make as much or more money buying the goods as they can selling them. They can buy goods in lots from independents, third parties, who got a certain amount on a major squeeze, and they can ask for significant lot sizes and demand price concessions at the same time. And so what's happening is the retailers are starting to turn up the heat, all right? The profit centers, the purchasing agents that are inside the retail outlets demand more. And so they expect price concessions. And what has happened is the shrinking of the number of retailers in the United States, ironically, has meant that those that are surviving have more power than they did before it happened. And so that's where we are right now. And so there's this new type of supplier retailer negotiation now. And so now, especially when goods come out and corporations are looking for places in the shelves, the sellers, the manufacturers, are going to the retail outlets and saying, I need that space, let's make a deal. So in other words, the manufacturers started coming up with ways to be able to negotiate things, okay? And so what has happened is promotional discounts have started to have their way in organizations. And so what's happened is that the deals that are offered for manufacturers to retailers have basically taken over the industry. And we'll talk about these. So before I do that, let's see. There it is. Okay, so this is a supermarket layout. I know this is not that easy to see, but this is what you would consider it to normally be. Okay. Now, realize in a supermarket, well, things are laid out in a certain way. There's the expectation that you know where everything is. And I'm sure you could go in any store and immediately align yourself up where the deli is, means you know also where frozen food is. Things kind of line up there that way. So if you think about it, here's the entrance in. There's the veggie in the deli. All right. And so you're coming through and walking through. In a supermarket, where do you think the most people pass or come by? People in supermarkets, number one location are the islands. Okay. This is where the most people pass by. And because these islands can be so valuable, these are the areas that supermarkets put up for sale. And they say, if you want to be able to come in and buy, or let's just say be in a special location, you have something unique that you have to be able to sell, we'll slot you right there. All right. And that's what a slotting allowance is. It is basically money that is paid by the manufacturer to be able to take that particular space. So without further ado, let's start talking about. And so the deals, the first one is forward buying. The manufacturer, because they don't want the inventory, they want to sell it, ask you to buy more than you need and stockpile it. Now, this is not bad, especially if the goods are shelf stable and they can stay for a while. The difficulty with that, unfortunately, is that there's always shrinkage. All right. There's always a certain amount that just seems to grow legs and walk out. And so forward buying is not the best thing in the world. And so one of the advantages is that if you can negotiate a continuous replenishment program, it means that you as the supermarket do not have to stock as much. Now, there's also the problem of what's known as diverting, where there are sections of the country where you get promotion discounts. And so you buy on the West Coast and you ship it to the East Coast and you actually make a profit. And you do this overseas, it's called arbitrage, okay? But sometimes just moving goods from one location to the next makes a difference. And so forward buying means I buy more. Oops. So this is what I just talked about, is slotting a lot. Get it out. Slotting allowance. So for the cost of being in a particular area, you will have a particular place so that you can maximize where consumers see you in the supermarket. And because they're not, you can't build, you can build bigger stores, but eventually you don't get it right. The problem with it is that you have limited space, and many times bigger corporations will deliberately take the slotting allowances so that smaller organizations don't have access to it. So this is actually a true story. Anybody know what Zapp's potato chips are? They're from Louisiana. The chair of my department at Louisiana Tech, he actually ran the test market for Zapp's potato chips. So they ran it in stores called Albertsons in Baton Rouge. So you literally go there, you stack Zapp's, and you look at what the count is. So we came back after 2 weeks, all gone. It's great, looks good. Stocked the shelves, came back 2 weeks, they're all gone. Stacked the shelves, came back 1 week, they're all gone. Stacked the shelves, watched them. Turns out the Lay's rep was buying the whole bulk so that consumers couldn't see it because they were no lie, because they were coming out with their own kettle chips. That's a real story. Okay. So that's the thing that kind of goes on in retail espionage. So anyway, slotting allowances, the big people don't want the independents to show up and take up their time. A failure fee is if I'm an independent organization and I'm really trying hard, I'm going to roll the dice and guarantee that the retail outlet is going to sell a certain number. And so what does that mean? It means this. I say to them, you will stack my item. I will sell 5,000 in 3 months. I won't pay you up front, but if I don't make that quota, I will pay you a failure fee because I didn't make it. And this is a very moral hazard because we've already talked about the buyers for those organizations sometimes can make more money buying the goods than they can selling. Well, the problem is that if I am a retailer, it is almost like I'm banking on their failure. And so it does create a moral dilemma, all right? You don't know whether the product failed due to the inferiority or the fact that they may not be hitting their quota that month. And so it's not a good one, all right? But it's one that's out there. What can you say? Private branding. Okay. Private branding is popular in the United States, very popular in Europe. I talked about Aldi. What they have is predominantly 2/3 of the brands that are in those stores are their own brands. Now, there's a corporation in the United States called IGA, Independent Grocers of America. They're the group when National and A&P food stores got overrun by Walmart, and they all kind of gathered together, some of the older supermarkets that are out there. And they started in the same kind of model that Aldi is in producing their own store brands. Why? Because store brands will earn them 34% margins, where if they are selling brand label goods, they're only making 2%. What are the advantages, or let's just say, where do they show their best? Well, we're talking about generic goods. A can of peas made by Stokey Van Camp is pretty darn close to a can of peas by Sam's Choice. As a matter of fact, many times you look at a Sam's Choice and it'll say canned by Stokey Van Camp. That happens too. So private labels are big, they're important, they keep smaller stores alive. And so the last thing to talk about is globalization. When we talk about wholesaling next week, we're going to find out something pretty surprising. Wholesaling is more regional and retailing is more global. Retail has lagged behind, and I think part of that has to do with both culture and the labor as well. And so Walmart has been successful in areas such as South and Central America. Europe totally bombed. Asia, they've been able to find some equal there, but they're huge Walmart-like stores in Korea and Vietnam and those places as well. So they've kind of held their own. Well, why has globalization taken so difficult? Well, one of them is it is a heavily intensive kind of real estate kind of business. Walmart, by the way, is the second largest owner of land in the United States behind the federal government. And it's not a Walmart that they own now, it's a Walmart that they abandoned to big a builder Walmart, okay? Walmart does not sell its property. It will rent it, but they're going to rent it to the right person, because the last thing they want to do is have a Walmart lookalike come in their former store and take them over. And so quality real estate is a difficulty. And physical logistics operations as well can be a nightmare. Understanding what it takes to do business overseas is a very specialized skill. And many times, the only way to have good relationships with suppliers is to buy into them. The only way, or let's just say, one of the major ways that retail outlets survive is being able to adjust to local preferences. So when I shopped in the South Korean meat market, it was 80% squid. And if you're going to be a Walmart in South Korea, you need to stock squid, and they did. So globalization is constant. It is going to be running forever, but it will be slow because of the difficulties, all right? But is globalization going to happen, and is it the future? The answer is yes, okay? Quite simply, once again, they benefit from the economies of scale, and the big will get bigger. There's no doubt about that. Walmart is in Brazil. I've seen Aldi come here to the United States, and I think Aldi is one of those great locations that is right for anyone. You're going to see their continuing kind of interaction in globalization as long as corporations are looking for new markets. And so the ending of this is retailing dead? Absolutely not. Once again, retailing, or let's just say face-to-face retailing, is still 86% of the market. And although 60% of electronics are sold online, 2/3 of the people who buy electronics online go to the store to see it. And like I said, I'm not sure you're going to shop for jewelry online much anyway. Okay, we are done with chapter 6. Very good. So next week, we will be talking about wholesaling, and we'll talk about why it is local and it's probably going to stay that way. Any questions? All right, have a good weekend.